Okay, I have 6:30, so we'll call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. We have a quorum present tonight. 2 members are absent. And the first item on our agenda is setting the meeting agenda. I have 2 changes that I know about. The District Awards Program, under new business, we're going to move up to first position. Okay. Jerry has a commitment here, so we want to have him participate in that discussion. And then under H, old business, we'll add a new item, administrator review process. And we're just going to be discussing the schedule and get that moving. Is there anything else to add or change on the agenda? No. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. There is no consent agenda tonight, so we can pass that by. Public open forum. There's no public present, so we will go past that. Citizens Advisory Committee update.
Madam President, managers, the only thing the CAC has really been working on lately is drafting the awards program framework. So that's in the agenda for us to discuss later tonight. They've been working on that for about 3 months, and they kind of started by looking at other watershed districts and nonprofit organizations that have award programs. They looked to see what their programs looked like and kind of took a few of those and crafted it into our own framework for you to consider tonight.
Thank you, Mike.
Madam President?
Yes.
I just want to note for the viewing audience that the members in the public audience are our CAC chair.
Exactly.
And then also our engineer. So.
The 2 of us.
Okay, so that's our next item. We'll just move right into that. Jerry, if you'd like to come up to the microphone, or we can hear you if you'd like to stay there.
Regarding the awards program?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Madam President and board members, I don't really have a lot to say about this at the moment. I think what we try to do here is craft something with a lot of help from Mike that could be presented to the board for your review. I know Jackie has sat through some of this. So we've had a lot of discussion for the last 3 months on it. I think it's a pretty exciting opportunity to show the public what the Watershed District is about, including the event that we would have in the springtime to be able to present the awards. So really, I think what I'd like to see is open discussion about what the board members feel about it and what changes or comments or whatever to it. We have some time to if it doesn't get fully resolved at this meeting, we still have some time to talk about it at one of the next board meetings, because we really won't be taking nominations till this coming fall, of course. So, but we didn't want to wait till summertime when things get busy and so forth. So, so that's all I really had to say for at the moment.
All right.
Right
Well,
now.
thank you for that. Just some background context. I think we had mentioned Champion Awards in a previous meeting before the board. And we considered a number of different top names. And the favorites of the committee membership there that evening at the last meeting was Champion and Legacy Awards. And it was kind of even, but there was sort of a leaning toward Legacy as being more broad and not so individual. So I just want to make comments on that. And then the paragraph right after the listing of the awards. Just a little change there. The application process would not be necessary for awards 5 and 6 instead of accepted, because you're accepting nominations. It's just not so much of a formal process. And then just so that the board has context, those 4 awards, 1 through 4, are really structured after our BMP program. And so it gives an opportunity to have like projects competing with like projects, because residential against ag or commercial, that's pretty hard to gauge, one over the other in that context. And then the last two, 5 and 6, are district-wide service awards. And we thought it would be nice to have an adult and also a junior. A lot of our education focus has been working with children and the students at the high school. So it was a way to get the young people involved as well. And then over on this third page, as we got into the venue discussion, originally we were thinking maybe an open house at our office, but the office open house structure doesn't really lend itself to an award presentation or ceremony because people are coming and going and so forth. And so that's when the discussion turned to more of a larger but also more of a community setting. And that way, because it would be a bigger venue, we would have the opportunity to have tables set up for our partners. So we might have our local DNR person there, the local SWCD, all the people that we work with, all the partners that we work with. Maybe the counties would like to have something to talk about their groundwater plans and their water plans and so forth. And that way, the crowd can go between all of these educational desks and get education that way. And then, of course, the presentation for the awards would be more of an opportunity for the district to do sort of a state of the watershed information session. And we can give the information to our stakeholders about what we've accomplished, particularly in the last period, and then also what's planned for the coming year. And so in that way, we accomplish that district-wide communication piece we've been talking about forever, which is newsletters or some kind of routine district-wide communication. And the more I thought about this, as we talked about it, the better I liked it even afterwards, because mailing newsletters is expensive. And I don't know what our home count is, but it's got to be 10,000 or more. And so, you're spending, postage is about 50 cents for a regular postage on first-class mail. So that's, $5,000–6,000 just on postage. And the idea here is that we could probably get comp space from our partners in the local community, but there would be no cost for food or beverage. And people attending the meeting could do that on their own because we're in a venue that would allow them to do that. So anyway, that's wanted you to have all that background discussion as you go through this. We probably would want to wait until the full board is here in March to vote on this, but it gives you something to think about and make sure that we're headed in the right direction, as Jerry mentioned. We don't want to waste CAC's time or the board's time if this isn't something that you think is the right track. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. So with that, can we get a sense for what your feelings are? Oh, Mike, sorry.
Well, Madam President, Manager Smaltz just sent me notes on a couple of items on the agenda. This is one of them. His thoughts were that it would probably be better for the district, as he is suggesting, to walk before we sprint. And so he thought maybe a lesser amount, perhaps 2 awards in the first year just to get the program up and running, and then consider what it might look like in the year following.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's one opinion. So any other thoughts from the board?
I don't know. I think it's a good idea to give people recognition when, I was even thinking that with like Craig Mattson or whatever, for working with us on that project out there. He was pretty willing participant, I think. And I know Margie Schmidt, who used to be the president for the Bone Lake Association, I know she just got awarded through Scandia. That was a different deal, but she just got awarded the Scandia Good Neighbor Award or whatever for being the Bone Lake Association president for all those years.
That's fabulous.
So I think it's good to award people.
it builds recognition, and at the same time, you are reinforcing our programs. Because structured like they are with the BMP structure, you're talking about that program as the award is being given out, and also in the press release as it goes to the local communication avenues. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it ended up. Jackie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it looks like a great program. I guess I'm wishing maybe I was involved in a little bit more of the planning of it. I think that there are too many awards on the list. And my biggest concern is, what is the plan for getting the information out there to everyone who would be eligible to apply for an award or be nominated? I mean, is it going to go, are we going to be partnering with every city that's issuing building permits, and so there's something that goes out with those, and everybody who has to get a watershed permit for something else, or every agricultural person that goes and applies for some kind of assistance or something through Washington County, or, how are we going to get all that out there so that we don't miss anybody, is what I'm not following at this point.
Well, first of all, just comment that you are involved, and there has to be a starting point, and so that was the CAC committee, and bringing back this outline, and that's really what it is right now.
I only put the blame on myself that I wasn't involved before, nobody else.
But my point, though, is that this kind of input is exactly what this step is all about. So it hasn't flushed out in all of the angles, and you make a good point that we have to have a communication program to get the word out about this new program that we're going to be instituting, a word program. So there's plenty of time to do that, to fill in the blanks and get involved in those steps. But the overall concept of it?
I love the concept of it,
Okay,
absolutely.
good.
The more awards and the more we involve our community and our people, the better.
Good. So with that, Jerry, I think you have a good idea that the majority here feels that this is on the right track. Yes?
Madam President, do you want to talk at all about what we want to give out as the award? There was some discussion about that at the CAC meeting.
Yeah, go ahead. You can talk about that. There's the plaque as the main thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about giving them a plaque that they can take home, and then having some kind of plaque in our office as well that we can add to each year, so we have it kind of in a public space. And we had a number of other ideas, and I don't know what you guys think about, but maybe giving something like a T-shirt along with it, or potentially working with some of the local cities to get some kind of public recognition for them in a city park or something like that. Or do you have any other ideas of things we could include?
Or to be thinking about it. I don't think we
or
need that
think
right
about
now.
it and
But
bring it to the
yeah.
next discussion. So.
yeah.
My only comment on that is, if you don't make it attractive enough for them individually, getting a plaque, yeah, that's great, having a plaque in our office is wonderful, but something that they themselves can feel that, wow, this is something special for me outside of a plaque type of thing. So, T-shirt is fine too, but I don't know if it's enough of a recognition perhaps.
Right. One of the things I was thinking about as I reviewed all of this, getting ready for tonight, on the business side, we have so many businesses that have done really good things to manage the water on their properties. Keys, for example, put in that pervious parking lot, for example, even before we had rules. We've got a number of others that have gone beyond really the standard project, and it's been some innovative things. The Goen property has that buried under the driveway treatment center and so forth. So for businesses, I was thinking that if we could come up with some kind of those plastic things that stick to the windows. As a business, we always had the Chamber of Commerce and Better Business Bureau and favorite vendors and so forth had given us all of those things. So you have your window display of all of those things. And that might be a, kind of a good idea for businesses, but even ag and residential could put it on their cars, for example, on their car windows and be proud about that, but be thinking about that type of thing. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes?
Just one thought too, kind of related to the signage. I don't know which watershed, but I know at least one watershed, they, like for individuals that have like rain gardens or something that they've installed in their yard, they give them like a little sign that they can actually put out there next to whatever the feature is, if they want to. Obviously, they don't have to.
Oh, I think that's great. Jessica came up with that teardrop shaped thing that's on I love our watershed, or my watershed. So I was thinking about that, as kind of the symbol, since we've used that already, that would be on that. And so under that could be, of course, I love my watershed, but legacy partner, and then a little description maybe of the year that they won it and so forth.
Yep.
So that's a way to also spread that and start conversations, especially in restaurants like Keys, if they were to have one, for example, but any place, even the apartment buildings that we have or the commercial buildings, people come and go out of those facilities all the time, and so we're reinforcing that community and individual participation that's so important in the success of our water goals. So I could talk about this for a long time, but let's move on. So thank you for that input, and we'll continue this and bring back more to CAC as it gets refined. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next item then is the subdivision permit policy.
Madam President, managers, you have in the board packet a memo regarding a matter that came up on a current permit that precipitated some additional discussion with staff and council. And so within the memo, you'll see some guidance there, recommended approach. And overall, we have then a path forward on this and would open it up for discussion.
Is the handout in front of us different from our packet?
It includes the,
Just this part, isn't it?
I think the attachment here with the,
Or in this attachment?
the motion is also separate, is revised in the memo so that the board could, if to approve this evening, the revised memo has a revised motion in it.
Okay, so we should use the one that says revised February 21st. Okay, everybody has that one? Okay. And the field inspection fee deposit, isn't that part of this too?
Correct.
Okay. The only question I had raised to a reply email from the email that we received on this, and I got an answer. My only concern was that we don't want to make this so cumbersome for ourselves and for the individual, and so if we could have alignment with the local municipal governing body, that would make a little bit more sense to me. But I understand from the response, I just caught that from Chuck before I left for the meeting, but well, I'll let you talk about it, because the city doesn't really have a policy on this, as I recall, and they liked this proposal, though. They saw it in our packet. They read it and liked it. So, Chuck, if you want to elaborate further on that response of yours.
Certainly, Madam Chair, board members. Well, specifically on the question that you asked about alignment with specifically the City of Wyoming, but the district's regulatory, LGUs generally. Emily, I think, did have that communication with Fred Weck at City of Wyoming. And he said they don't have a specific formalized written down policy for the way they deal with this same issue, but that he looked at the district's proposed way of doing it and was favorably inclined toward it and said it's generally consistent with the way that they would look at administering their own permits too. More generally, this is specific to the scenario of a developer who develops a residential subdivision, and the process goes from the initial subdivision and platting through the developer's mass grading, installation of roads and stormwater facilities and other common infrastructure, and then the preparation of individual building pads on house lots. And then at that point, in some cases, the developer will stay in the ownership and sponsor the construction. In some cases, the developer will sell off the lots one by one or in lots to builders who will buy the lots and then build the houses. So the question that we wanted to address was, what's the most efficient way to administer the permit so that the developer has the ability to sell individual lots while still partially owning other lots, owning the common areas, and how do we do that whole process so that the builders who take ownership of individual lots and are building are still under the general supervision of the district permit, and there's still oversight of how they're managing erosion control and site conditions. And basically, the district's permit does typically span all the way until the houses are built and the disturbed areas are stabilized. And the district's rules do allow for permit transfer, so you can basically take one permit for the whole subdivision and you can transfer it piecemeal so that ultimately everybody's sharing in the same permit as to their property that they own. And what's proposed here is just kind of the way we've thought about it to make it as efficient as possible. Number one, we want to allow the developer to not have responsibility once the developer has sold a lot and has nothing to do with it anymore. We don't want the developer's financial deposit to be used for things that the developer doesn't have control over once a builder has that responsibility. And we want to make sure that in the district's permitting administration, it's very clear who owns and who is responsible for what portions of the subdivision during this process. So basically, we've taken the permit transfer process and we've created a specific transfer form that's kind of streamlined. Basically, it makes the builder be cognizant of appropriate site control practices, recognize responsibility for that, provide $1,000 escrow per lot in exchange for, instead of having the developer be responsible. And that's, I think, the basic gist of the approach.
So just so we're clear, is there one step or two transfers? Because if the developer, there's a builder, that's either hired by the developer or the individual buying the lot, is there an interim step where the builder becomes responsible during that building stage, and then it transfers over complete lot and house to the individual buyer?
The framework that always applies for district permits formally is whoever owns the land is the responsible permittee.
Okay, so if a builder came in to do a spec house, the builder would have that responsibility transferred at that time and then to the ultimate owner when the house is sold.
Or the builder would complete the house, put in the stabilization, sell it to the owner. At that point, there would be no transfer because the site would be done.
Yes,
wrapped up.
okay. All right, well, that's a good point to make sure everybody understands that there is a way where the individual person doesn't really come into the equation, and that's if the builder takes over responsibility, turns a turnkey product over to the ultimate owner, which includes meeting all of the permit requirements of the district. Okay,
Yes.
all right, good. Okay. Is there any further questions anyone has?
Oh,
Well, I'll make the motion to accept this policy and follow the suggested motion on the memorandum.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Okay, next is the Forest Lake Enhanced Street Sweeping implementation.
Madam President, managers, in the board packet is some information, memo along with the agreement with the city of Forest Lake. So as noted, the district had completed a study this past year, and we used the draft version to develop a grant application, a Clean Water Fund grant application in partnership with the city. And so the city submitted it, and they were awarded a grant for $220,000, which would be ultimately for both the purchase of a regenerative air street sweeper, but also for the implementation of the sweeping plan. We received the agreement here not long before the board packet went out. One addition then that I definitely wanted to make or include in this was a piece that it referenced back to the plan itself, which highlights an optimal level of sweeping as a minimum. So, and so that's now in the agreement, and the city seems to be fine with that. This agreement then needs to be in place prior to the work plan that is required and due by March 12th for Bowser. And then Bowser and the city will enter an agreement for that grant. But we will be a partner in it, and per the original application for the grant, we indicated that we would be contributing to the match portion. And as you can see, the indicated portion for the district here would be $19,415.
Do you think it's a good idea to have that enhanced option added to this as a addendum? So that it's part of the agreement? I know you call it out under operations, described on page 24 and 25 of the management plan.
It is within the work plan.
Okay.
So, and I've talked to Bowser about this particular issue, so they can require it in the work plan, and that becomes part of the agreement as well.
Okay. All right, just so we're clear, so other than that, is there any other points you want to make or questions from the board?
I don't have any.
Okay. Well, let's proceed.
All right. I'll make a motion to approve attached funding agreement between the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District and City of Forest Lake, and authorize its execution by the board president with non-substantive changes and on advice of council.
I'll second it.
Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Moody Lake Alum Project.
Madam President, managers, in a similar fashion, the district here is required to complete a work plan for the Clean Water Fund grant that we have received for the in-lake alum treatment for Moody Lake. As a part of this, it was suggested and recommended by Bowser staff that we have on hand an agreement for, with the township, the Chisago Lake, or town of Chisago Lake, regarding the use of their park area on the west side of Moody Lake. And as such, the agreement was written, drafted to be signed by both the township as well as by myself. So I attended that meeting on Tuesday evening, so they approved the agreement, and we've executed that accordingly. I also just wanted to bring it here to your attention that we will have a subsequent agreement with Bowser that we will then need to bring back to the board after the work plan is completed, submitted, approved. We will then have another agreement between the district and Bowser for the grant. So no action required on this matter.
Okay, I just had a question on the use of alum before we've solved the curly leaf problem. Is that a good thing? Will it kill off the curly leaf, or will we be facing another alum treatment requirement prior to 10 years?
No, the loading from well, a couple things. Normally the plant growth is around the perimeter in the shallower area of the littoral area of the lake. The alum treatments occur in the deeper parts of the lake. And we also currently are restricted, given the classification of the lake, not to be able to do a treatment until, in fact, we've completed addressing both the external load and the internal load. So we would anticipate in the spring of, assuming we do the treatment this fall in 2018, in the spring of 2019, that we'd be prepared to do an in-lake treatment on the curly leaf.
Okay, good. And that's planned anyway as part of the routine.
Well, we haven't been able to do a treatment, a curly leaf pondweed treatment on Moody Lake ever. So DNR has never allowed that, but we know it's there.
Okay,
But it's also then replaced later on in the season by a lot of other aquatic plants. So
will the alum treatment in itself, though, have a negative impact on curly leaf?
there's no evidence that it would. What we would expect is that the water clarity will improve, of course. Curly leaf is an early season plant, which in the springtime, there's a lot of light penetrating as well. So we wouldn't expect anything to change too radically, given the amount of curly leaf that's already in existence there.
Yeah.
But what we would expect is that the native plants that come later in the season would have more ability to grow.
Good. Well, that's an important point, so that's wonderful. And we don't have to take action on that, that was just an update?
Correct.
It says discussion action. So there's a staging, isn't there a staging part to this? Access agreement?
Right, I guess that was an error on the agenda then on my part to have it as an action item. It should have been just discussion. Mostly just making the board aware that, one, that I did in fact meet with the town board, and the agreement has been executed
Oh,
on
okay.
behalf of the district.
Okay, so it's already been done, all right, thank you. Okay, Ag BMP cost share program.
Madam President, managers, I recently met with two of the board members present here to review the current cost share program that we have in the Watershed Management Plan, and then discuss in more detail what that might look like into the future based on some work that the district has completed in the last couple of years. This being both the diagnostic work for Moody Lake and Bone Lake, in addition to the sub-watershed analysis work that's been completed by the two SWCDs, namely Washington and Chisago counties. So based on that information, we now have two sets of data or information regarding priority sites. The diagnostic work is based on monitored data and gives a priority list based on sites that we anticipate, well, not anticipate, but that we know based on the monitoring as to where these heavy loads are. And that's where, in fact, how we identified the Moody Wetland project up at the Matson Farm. The other set of information on the subwatershed analysis provides a field scale level of projects that list priorities based just on the edge of the field. It doesn't tell us how much load there is from the edge of the field to a particular water body, so it doesn't give us any information about that. So it's a desktop exercise that lists some prioritization. And in conversation then with the two managers, we had agreement that we should try to merge these two and look at these sites that the SWCD's put together in combination with the monitoring data and such to then create another sublist or subset of this information or sites on a field basis with the potential then of creating a 2 or maybe 3-tier structure for future prioritization and funding. So it's, and at least an initial discussion is laid out there. And I would anticipate that we'll have more discussion on this, but presently just looking for some feedback on this suggested process.
After our meeting the last time, I got to think, and I kind of went back and looked at the minutes from that meeting. I think it was in July, like July 27th, and so I kind of refreshed my memory, and that in the minutes it kind of said that Craig Mell, I think, more or less, they had their list and they just kind of wanted our money and just wanted to sort of implement things
Right.
the way that when it started coming in, they just wanted to use our money. And the more I thought about it, the less I liked that idea, unless we end up having a list of, these are our projects that are priority projects, and the other ones you're going to have to probably come back to us and.
As they become priority projects.
Yeah,
First
well, I
we have to deal
mean,
with
there's
them.
some that might align with what we want to do,
Right.
but that whole list, like Mike was saying, it's just to the edge of the field, so we don't even have any idea if it's even impacting any of our water bodies that much downstream. I mean, so I'm not sure how we go about getting the information and finding out of all that whole list that they gave us, which ones are our priority projects, but
We can do that. I mean, we've talked to the engineer about this already, and I mean, this is really then a matter of, as I said, scrubbing that list that they provided on the top 50 about with their recommended practices. Because there's always value in doing those practices, maybe just at that particular field level for soil health or soil erosion or things like that. But what we're after in the goals in the mission of the district is more about either improving the water bodies or protecting them. So those are then two different objectives or goals for those kind of different lists. So, but we have the technical ability through staff and our engineer to review these and identify that subset of priority sites that make sense for the water bodies that we know are impaired or that we want to protect. I think the Dahlin property is a perfect example. Through that diagnostic monitoring, we identified that as being a high loading site, and the district took action, a cost effective one as well, where we became the renter of the property to all but eliminate the erosion that was coming off of that field. So given its close proximity to Bone Lake. So in a similar fashion, we can go through all the other sites, literally individually, field by field, and see how close they are to either a connecting feature of some type, a stream, waterway, or something, or even just on the edge of some of our other outlying lakes, Second Lake or Lent or things like that. So we can do that, I think, quite readily, and then complete the analysis of the prioritization based on the edge of field to the actual water body. So it's not an overly complicated thing, but it does highlight a substantial difference in approach that this watershed district has had for a long time and continues to utilize in addressing specific water quality concerns compared to some general conservation spread across the landscape. Because through the diagnostic process, we're able to identify these high loading sites that have a real high return on investment. We're looking at reducing or the impairment for Moody Lake at a cost that's going to be under $40 a pound of phosphorus for the total thing, all the project work, all of it, the internal lake, over that period of time. And the list of these conservation practices is twice, the total dollar amount is more than twice, and we would not have resolved much of the water quality issues because it was one specific site that was identified through the monitoring. So an important distinction then between the way that the two approaches, not saying that what they're doing in terms on a field basis doesn't have value, but it doesn't necessarily align with the district's goals and mission.
Right, and I mean, it does have value because what they're doing is protecting things, and there's also groundwater that we've got to protect too.
Absolutely.
But we're kind of limited and we've got a finite budget. So, you know, we want to get the most bang for our bucks, obviously, so.
Right, and I think that was what the managers, I mean, what you communicated when we went over it too, is that if there were unlimited funds, of course, we could do a lot more things, but we're trying to work within the levy budget that we have.
So we get what we need to happen there from a more controlled aspect, and then with a lot more direction to our partners on the SWCDs in both counties. We also get to tap into the resources that they have through the agricultural loans and grants that are available from the federal and state government. So I think it's the beginning of a very good program, and we're probably going to want to finalize this within the next, I would think, 2 months, but there's time for input before the final structure is laid out. So just like the awards program, this is for the board, the full board, to spend some time looking at the direction that this is heading and offering other comments so that we can enhance it and hopefully get it wrapped up by the end of May, at our May board meeting. Okay?
I did on this note, I had called, they're a wildlife biologist at, they have local wildlife biologists that work with farmers on different projects, and I had called one earlier to see if they had any interest in, I just left a message saying that we were developing an ag BMP program and asked if they had any interest in putting any input into it or whatever, and they didn't call me back till after the meeting, but a lady named Jennifer Hahn had called, and I mean, she was real interested, but she didn't actually offer any input, but she sounded excited about what we were doing. So.
Good. And where was that again?
Huh?
Where was that? Where was she from?
She was from Pheasants Forever organization.
Great.
So, and she may call Mike, and if we have any more meetings on this or anything, you know, she may come to a meeting, and so.
Fantastic.
I just thought, even Pheasants Forever, sometimes some of these, like maybe like conservation I don't know, sometimes it helps to have more partners when you put a grant together, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So, you know, maybe that Conservation Partners grant fund that we were talking about the other day, you know, maybe if you get Pheasants Forever in there and sign on and, you know, get Ducks Unlimited or, anyway,
I agree.
so.
Madam President, one more item that does remind me that with respect to that outside partnerships, I had also contacted the Environmental Initiative. They're a nonprofit located in Minneapolis. Does a lot of work also in partnership with the McKnight Foundation, which in general has a lot of interest in the Mississippi River Basin as a whole. So met with them about potential partnering on a sort of a program. And that could also be incorporated with the One Watershed, One planning for the Lower St. Croix. And the thought there being that, again, we do value the work on these other sites outside of our specific goals, but given the funding criteria or the funding needed for that, I'm hoping that they would be a partner in that effort across the whole entire Lower St. Croix, but offered the district here as a pilot if they were so interested. So
Nice. That's great. It'll resolve one of our research goals for the year. It's good. Okay, next item, draft 2017 progress report.
Madam President, managers, the first draft of the progress report for 2017 is enclosed. And again, this is the early version of it to get some initial feedback. We're waiting on various pieces of information or data, both on the monitoring side and then as well as the audit, which has now been pushed back until March 22nd. So we won't have that information until sometime in April to complete the progress report. But in general, this is a similar format, and staff has continued to evaluate new ways to look at deficiencies with the district or provide additional information. And I think one that's in here that's of interest, maybe you've noticed too, is simply some of the website usage information or traffic flow. So.
Yeah, that was higher than I expected it to be.
What was higher than you expected it to be?
The amount of people looking at the website, using it.
I'm on page 12.
It is looking better. The information is a lot easier to get at, so you don't have to search layers to get to something, so it has improved. The only, I'm going to try to get to the water monitoring on page 22. I just took this chart on page 22 and then added my own little column on the right to put in all the different lakes so that I could see them all at one time, spread across, because I was pretty blown away by the mean summer phosphorus concentration reporting. And it's pretty remarkable. Moody Lake, 384. When this started, probably 2010, I suppose, that data was from. And 2017 results, it's at 86. The next one, Bone Lake at 85. 2017 results at 30. So the phosphorus reduction for Moody was 78%. Bone Lake, 65%. Jumping down to Little Comfort, 118 when this plan started, and 2017 we're at 43, 64% reduction. Shields, 336, we're at 191 for 2017, 43% reduction. Sylvan, unbelievably, is even better than it was. 21 when this report started, and at 14 now. Forest at 41 is now at 35 at the end of 2017. And Comfort at 61. This was probably 2008 data, honestly, so 10 years ago. And we're at 31. So a 49% reduction in phosphorus over the course of that 10-year period. So that's pretty remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Is there any place else in the state of Minnesota that is showing that kind of reduction? Okay. Well, you know, I have comments on some of this. I asked Emily to send me a Word document so that I could just make them, instead of writing, just make them on the actual.
So those were notes off of.
No, what I did is I took the information that's on the following pages for each lake, and I just put it on one chart so that I could
Like that.
see it across
Okay.
in one
Right.
chart,
Okay.
which is going to be my recommendation in presentation, so that we as a board can look at all of our lakes here and then look at where we started, put the date
The date there
for
would be
this.
good. Yeah.
Yes, when it started was 2008, I believe. This was from the Wink study. So it's 2008, 2017, our 10 years of progress that we've made according to our plan, and then the reduction that we've achieved in that 10-year period. So if we put it all on this one format here, this chart, we've got the story right here. But that is a remarkable, remarkable achievement. Now, I think that there's been some things that probably we didn't have control on, but that's part of the updating that our engineers do with this report every 10 years, but there's been land use changes. I know there's a reduction in the number of farmers and farming that's occurred, so that probably has had a lot of it, or part of it is attributable to that. But it's also, I think, not just these big projects that we focus on so much of our attention on, but it's the BMPs that were instituted at the very beginning of the district. Even before we had rules, we were working with our local partners in reviewing their plans. And so it's the BMP, the adherence to BMP practices and our rules that I think have contributed a great deal to this overall report, because it's not just one thing. We haven't had a major project in every district that's going to resolve this, or going to explain this drastic of a drop. So it's that combination of targeted projects and a district-wide adherence to best management practices. So I just wanted to point that out, because it gets lost in all these pages that you're flipping through until you can present it in a just one chart format like that. So as you go through this, I just want you to understand that that's something to be proud about.
Yeah, well, there was actually an article several months ago, I don't know exactly when it was, but it was talking about all the money that's out there that watershed districts use, and the Clean Water Legacy Fund, and that in a lot of cases they're not getting any results. And I thought, well, we are. You know, it's like,
Right. I know, and we all read those articles, and I just, you just got to wonder, what, why, because this success isn't just occurring now. I mean, we've been going down this trail for a long time, and there's evidence of why this kind of an approach works. But when people want to compare what we're doing to other districts, first of all, it's difficult because every district's different. Your makeup is different. We've got a lot of lakes in our area, but you've got to stay focused on the goal that you've laid out for yourself, and you just can't get dissuaded from marching toward that goal, because it's easy to get off track. But if you stay focused, this is what can be accomplished in 10 years. And that's the story that hopefully will be shared with other districts around the state, and they can start achieving these kinds of results. And then Minnesota doesn't have to worry about the legislature being concerned about how these dollars are being spent, because this is clear evidence that done correctly, we can have results that nobody really anticipated could be achieved. That kind of improvement in 10 years. Now, there's 10 years of study before that, of course, so it's 20 years, but the last 10 years has been really when we've had rules and we've been working on BMPs and critical projects. But wow. So
I know
that's my comment.
I know
Wow.
on Bone Lake, and I've stated it before, but at a previous meeting, and I've gotten a lot of comments from people on the lake. This is the first year I can actually, I can see my feet at chest high, and I know that a good portion of that was because we didn't have a lot of runoff. At one point in the summer, we didn't get rain for
Exactly.
a long time. So I understand that.
Right.
But I don't think I've ever been able to see like stuff pretty clear, you know, from my dock, at the end of my dock down, you know,
Right.
like leaves or whatever. I've never been able to see that ever since I've been on the lake, so.
Right. Well, that's wonderful.
Madam President, I do want to comment on one thing on the ag side. You have to remember, though, from 2008 until 2013, we had historic commodity prices. So while there may be fewer farms, the number of acres farmed are pretty similar. And in fact, we've also have watched through that time period, any sort of marginal property or farmland typically got converted into a row crop, and
Okay.
which kind of works against some of our goals too, depending on how it's being managed. So, so I think from that standpoint, I think it is more from the standpoint of other things that the district has been doing over that 10-year period.
Yeah, but even when those land use practices, or land use changes, I mean, we have better practices in place now.
Right.
The BMPs and the oversight on the rules and so on. And that's what I mean, is that, you know, we have retarded, meaning stopped, degradation, and our projects are cleaning up past mistakes. Our BMPs are going to make sure that those mistakes don't repeat in the future. But yeah, I just was really very proud and wowed by the significant improvement. The other thing I noted too is on there's a report for the Appendix A under Education and Outreach, our district tour in May. We haven't talked about one for this year, but if there are significant enough new projects that we should invite the board to see on a tour like that, I think maybe staff can start working on that kind of thing, and we can, I'd like to see that be an annual process, because it's really good to get out and see these projects. There's always something that's working, that we're working on every year. So if you could think about that and bring it to maybe our April meeting, we still have time to get that done in May or June. And then the final comments on the draft report you want at the March meeting, is that correct? Or before?
Well, it probably won't come to the board until April or something. Given the timing, we won't have our audit until March 22nd, which is our regular meeting for March. But at the same time, if you have reviewed it and had comments presently on this first draft, we would certainly welcome that input.
Okay. And again, if you want to do it on your computer, there's a Word document available on the report. All right, we'll move on. Under Old Business, Watercraft Inspection Program, Joint Powers Agreement.
And President Managers, I'll turn this one over to Mike Sorensen.
Madam President, Managers, we have for your consideration today the draft 2018 Joint Powers Agreement between Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District and Chisago County. It's really similar to previous years. Basically, the agreement is for up to $75,000 worth of watercraft inspections. We've never actually hit that $75,000 in the past, and last year, for the first time, we hired additional inspectors ourselves to kind of use up some of the remaining funds that we had. The agreement is very similar. The only difference from 2017 to 2018 is that the level 2 wage cap under fees for services was increased from $28 to $29 per hour, and that includes all the overheads, so the inspector's not actually being paid that much themselves. It pays for their uniform and their tablet that they use and some other things. And this rate is not paid frequently. It's only paid to our single lead watercraft inspector, and he's a retired police officer who's returned several years, and he serves as our lead inspector now, which means that he helps train in our new inspectors by actually going to the boat launch with them and helping them get used to the job. Other than that, the agreement is exactly what it has been in the past, and we included some figures that show the breakdown of how the funds are expected to play out for each lake and each access. And we handed out some additional handouts just tonight that are kind of a revision to the ones that were in the board packet. And the only difference is we found out from Washington County what we're expecting to get from our grant through them for Forest Lake and Bone Lake.
And how much was that?
What's that?
How much was that?
That was, let's see here, $16,500, and that's just less than what we got from them last year, which was
Is that all for Washington County, though? No, I don't think so, is it?
the purple on Bone Lake and Forest Lake is all from Washington County. So I think we requested somewhere around $30,000 from them, which is what we have in the past, and they are requesting that the board gives us $16,500, which is just slightly lower than what we got last year from them for that same grant.
Okay, so I'm looking at Bone. Is that the top sheet, estimated funding for boat access? Is that the right one?
Yep, I'm looking at the estimated funds per lake. And then the purple is our Washington County grant request. So there's 1,000 on Bone Lake and 15,500 on Forest Lake.
Oh, okay, here we go.
2,000
I'm looking at the wrong one.
2,000 on Bone Lake, right?
I'm talking about the revised ones that were handed out tonight with the red print on top.
Right. Was it 2,000 for Bone Lake and then?
Just 1,000 from Washington County.
You have 1,000 from Washington County, that's the grant request.
Yep,
1,000 for Bone Lake,
correct.
okay.
Know the difference.
15,500 for Forest Lake.
Yep.
Okay. Estimated funds per lake. I got it.
Madam President, managers too, and then just for our viewing audience, I do want to make note that, so while the additional inspectors that the district hired wasn't just to use up the funds, but rather that we hired those with the specific goal of targeting our weekend activity. And so that shot our inspection rate really almost doubled what it had been in previous years.
More than doubled.
Right,
the
and
number.
so, Mike has been managing that program and oversaw that process and managing those inspectors, and so I really commend him from the work that he's done there, so.
Yeah, well, the board had noticed that some years ago, that we were staffing in times when there wasn't a lot of activity. So that's made that big of a difference. I remember that first report, it was substantial. So that's good, and we're keeping that up, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you.
So do you need a motion to?
Yeah, we
Okay.
do.
All right, I'll move to approve the joint powers agreement between Chisago County and the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District for cost sharing of the boat launch inspection program.
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Rule revisions.
President managers, you may recall that last board meeting, there was a request to provide some additional comments or revisions. Staff has done so, and they are incorporated within and ready for your approval.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I've already thanked her by email, but Emily did a nice job of outlining the changes. It was hard to, without a red line version, hard to understand whether or not changes had been made. And there were those couple of things in the opening paragraphs that were obviously wrong. So she did a great job of outlining the comments at the last workshop, and then the outcome of change, or maybe it was moved to a different section or something like that. But anyway, that made everything very clear. I'm going to make the motion that we approve the rules as presented.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
formally speaking, it's a resolution with a roll call
of
vote.
course it is. Thank you. You know, I can't find my resolution document, but that's okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, here it is. Resolution 180201. I will make the motion that we approve that resolution in adopting the revised Watershed District rules.
You seconded last time.
I'll second it, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, that is a roll call vote. Jackie Anderson, aye. Jackie McNamara.
Aye.
Wayne Mull.
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz, absent. John Spence, absent. The majority rules, it's unanimous on the quorum present for tonight's meeting, and I declare the resolution adopted on February 22nd, 2018. Thank you. Next item is Clean Water Partnership loan update.
Madam President, managers, district has been looking at some funding options over the last several months, and through the MPCA, the Clean Water Partnership Loan Grant Program is available to the district. And as such, at the last board meeting, there were a couple other items asked to be brought back, and in particular, some information on what the estimated repayment schedule would look like, as well as then some loan scenarios, including potential projects, and both at the $1 million and the $1.5 million rates. So there's some information within the board packet there, along with Emily put together a estimated timeline for how the district would proceed with both acquiring the loan and then ultimately at the end, starting the repayment and then the ultimate final payment.
There's a new sheet that was handed out tonight with the calculation, the amortization for the 1.5 scenario was incorrect. And so that's what you have tonight. And the timing on this, Mike, is 60 days from the point that they get the application. And is that waiting until the full board is here? Is that going to impede anything?
Well, they will, the agency, PCA, will respond within 60 days. Presently, we would need to complete a couple more items, including the attached resolution. But the main thing this evening is for the board to advise the staff as to which funding scenario that we would ultimately want to pursue, and then we can work with the MPCA staff and bring the final items to the board for action.
Here it is. So if this is submitted as this has it, March 22nd, the first disbursement would occur in May, the end of May 2018. And the first payment, looking at the 1.5 scenario, would be 12/15 of 2021. So the first payment isn't until almost 3.5 years later. Seems unbelievable, really?
Yes, and if we didn't see an immediate need, and we waited until, say, May, and they responded by July, it would kick it back another 6 months from that time frame. So, but
My only comment is if we've got some additional time, I would be in favor of taking another look at this and looking at what we have left to implement and putting that schedule together. if the payment isn't due for 3 years, then we're going to have projects coming along in that 3-year period. And I want to make sure that we've set aside funding in this plan to satisfy those needs. Because as I understood it, that we were talking about at one time during the budget discussion, $5 or $6 million to complete our plan. And if we allocate that much, or we apply for that much, it gets set aside for us, then we are pulling it down as we need it, not expending all of it, it's not distributed until we need it. And so that first 3-year payment in, let's just assume this one, in 12/15/2021 is going to be on the amount that's pulled out of that fund. Either that, or we do $1.5 or $2 million now, and then in 2 years we do another $2 million, so that you've got successive loans that you're dealing with.
Madam President, managers, I think the latter scenario would be preferred by council and by PCA, as it is similar to a bond or other loan option, in that we would be expected to use the funds within the 3-year period, and then hence that's when the repayment period starts. So the larger dollar amount that we were talking about to complete all the projects was really over a longer period beyond 3 years.
Okay.
So pursuing something and really reviewing everything that we can presently anticipate. The $1.5 million is $500,000 for the next 3 years. That seems to be a pretty solid number for the district at this time. And I'm not sure if we ask for $2 million, and if we only spent $1.5 million, if there's any really recourse. But my understanding there wouldn't be. We just wouldn't be able to have the money because it's on a reimbursement basis. So, but presently, this as laid out by these items in the board packet, these are pretty solid estimates at this time, as we understand what our projections for the next 3 years. Not saying that in year 3 we have not found another project of some substance, either in JD6 or the golf course region, or...
Well, JD6 is something new. I mean, that's just been added here recently. I'm looking at some of the things that have been in the plan since, it was started, and I don't see a lot of those being addressed here. So we've got some time to really study this and go through and make sure that we've got everything considered that we want to consider. So if we can bring this back to the March meeting.
Sure.
And in the interim, providing a list maybe with the managers contacting you and talking about some of the things that they've identified. We can have a consolidated list at the March meeting.
I'll work with the engineer also. We've had some discussions on this already, but some of it, again, is going back to either recently completed diagnostic work, in-progress diagnostic work, or additional diagnostic work that we feel is necessary. But that's been a very effective means for us to identify these projects. And so looking at that, the timelines of those and the perspective of what we might see for future projects.
Well, in the interest of keeping things always moving toward that end, the Comfort Lake Diagnostic Study has not been put on this list. It's the last lake district to require a diagnostic study, even though it's had previous ones. The first one's now 20 years old, but it encompasses, what people don't remember sometimes maybe, is that it encompasses all of that commercial area of Forest Lake, the city of Forest Lake. And there is a lot of activity happening there, and I think that we want to get on board with that diagnostic study sooner rather than later. The other big project that I don't see, and that could be part of either the Forest Lake District or the Comfort Lake District, because of that Forest Lake City impact, is the municipal stormwater program. And we're just starting the early identification of that, but I think that we need to be setting aside some dollars for the further mapping and so forth that project is going to require, because there is need for it, and we told the city that we're working with them over the next 15 months to get that identified and drawn out. Maybe not all fully implemented, but I think we need to have that calculated into this request for funding as well, so that we can move forward. We don't have any delays in that activity. There are a couple of wetland reclamations in Bone Lake. Little Comfort has a couple. Forest Lake has a big one, FL 44. So do we have that accounted for in this request?
Well, Bone Lake, we have those ones presently identified that we're working on.
Yeah. I didn't see the Forest Lake one though.
And are any of those
My recollection
possible
is
for,
the
you sent in
monitoring
for
data
grants
showed
for
that
some of
the
them already, right? But we
FL44
didn't.
was not-
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not a priority.
Okay.
The water coming out of that watershed was actually relatively clean
Good.
compared to the other watersheds.
I think that cattle operation is gone. There used to be some kind of ag business in that area, so.
And I think that's a similar story to some of those wetland projects that were in the plan for the Bone Lake area, like that one between Moody and Bone Lake. I think that's no longer considered a priority.
Okay. The other thing is the stream biotic monitoring. We're doing some now in that Birch, Sunrise, Little Comfort area. But there was to be some extensive work done on the Sunrise River. We've got 2 branches of that, maybe a third coming in under JD6. I'm convinced that the Sunrise has a 3rd branch coming out of that area too, into Forest Lake. Right now, it's an unnamed stream, but
Not according to Google, it's named.
is it named?
It's a Sunrise.
Oh, is it? Good.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Where's that at?
On the south side of Third Lake, there's a tributary that drains in there. And to my knowledge, at least communicating with the DNR about official naming of water bodies in the state of Minnesota, well, actually through the USGS as a whole, what Google gets that information and then applies it to their naming of natural features on the landscape.
So then we have 3 branches, actually starting points of the Sunrise within our district, because the first one is coming somewhere in that Bixby Park area. EOR found that out when they did their big study for the flowage report, and now we've got that one, and then there's the one starting up in Moody, Bone area. Is that where the Sunrise starts there? Because that's a branch of the Sunrise as well.
There is nothing designated in that area that far out,
So it starts at school?
more or less.
If you follow some of our maps, though, you follow that blue line for water,
Right.
it goes all the way up to just north of Moody, and then comes down through Moody into Bone, and then out through Birch. Now, I can't find a real straight connection between Birch and school.
Oh, there is.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I'm just curious why that's not considered a river system.
Well, there is a formal process for naming, and if it could be an activity that the district could undertake. There is a minimum number of miles required for a naming of a stream.
I would think the U.S. Army Corps would have that information already, though, wouldn't they?
Well, we can look in the report they completed in 2014 for the Sunrise to see what they have in there.
So anyway, those are some of the projects that I noted that were not on this list. So if we can maybe sit down and have a higher level conversation, or maybe you and EOR can, and then split these into two timed requests, so that we have our first request for the CWP, and then we have our second one. We're ready to go with that second one. That gets us, at least 90% of the way to our accomplished projects in the plan.
Some of these that are noted, it's possible to still get grants for some of these, correct? Or not?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just because we have it on the list there as a basis for the loan application doesn't mean we can't continue to pursue other funding sources, particularly
That's the
grants.
beauty of this program. It's a safety net to keep us moving forward, but doesn't stop us from going out and getting grant dollars. If they don't come through and we want to continue with the project, though, we've got, a 10-year amortized 0% interest access to the dollars.
But it has to be used in 3 years. What if it's not?
Well, we just don't get it. I mean,
Right, yeah.
it's not like we get the money all up front, like a
No,
loan.
so if it's
Yeah.
not used, then the amortization schedule's gonna change, because we'll be paying back less money. Is that
that's
how
correct.
that works?
Correct.
Okay. You're not committed to them just because you applied for it?
Correct, they hold it, and it's a revolving fund on their part
Okay.
that they use.
Okay.
Okay, so we will take a good look at this and provide some input individually to staff, and take a look at maybe a second tier of funding so that we're ready to go with that second tier when we need it. Okay? And that'll come back to us at the March meeting?
Sure.
Okay. All right, next item is I suppose this resolution on reimbursement bond regulations under the IRS can wait until we're ready? Or does this one have to be acted on tonight?
No, it's a template.
Sample?
And
Okay,
so,
good.
And so I've attempted to connect with bond counsel on this. We will need to obtain such services. And that individual and I have been playing a little phone tag last few
Okay.
days.
All right, so that's for further consideration. So let's move on to the Comfort Lake Regional Hydrology Study.
Well, a good segue from the discussion on the, I know it's not exactly the same as the diagnostic work, but this would be comparable, and it's what we anticipate, at least some of the additional work that we're looking to have done in here. So in addition to the work committed to by the joint meeting with the City of Forest Lake and the Watershed District, along with the City of Wyoming and the Watershed District, MnDOT has contacted the district about planned activity along Highway 8. So we've been working with those other partners to obtain information as much as possible, and I'll let Greg provide some update on that specifically. In addition, then, we have developed a relationship with some of the universities and other entities, such as the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, but the University of St. Thomas has a senior capstone program in which they have been willing to do a certain amount of work on behalf of the district with combination with faculty and students, and describing this regional hydrology issue, and then the interest in having more historical information and trying to understand what has happened in some of these areas, because there's so much area that has been drained, artificially manipulated, et cetera. So they've taken that on as a potential project, and in addition, have an interest in incorporating some GIS work for a storyboard for that same drainage area, because that's an activity that the district has been interested in pursuing as well on a district-wide basis. But I'll let Greg give a little update on his communications with MnDOT and where we are there.
Yep, so we've been in contact with MnDOT over the last couple of months regarding their project along Highway 8. It's primarily going to consist of either culvert replacements or repairs or lining along the stretch, well, kind of all the way from where the Bixby Park outlet, kind of that crossing there. They're not actually doing anything to that crossing other than cleaning it, but then all the way down past the Little Comfort Lake pipe connection there. So there's a lot of culverts along there. Just in the last week, I finally got their survey information for all the culverts along there. So I've been going through those, and the main thing I want to look for kind of prior to them actually submitting the permit, we wanted to kind of get ahead of things, is just to make sure that there wasn't anything we saw there that looked out of place or would somehow prevent us from draining water the way we wanted to or doing a future project. Thus far, I haven't found anything of that nature yet, but I have found some interesting information just regarding the drainage area that's south of Little Comfort Lake. I found some old historic photos that actually had drawings of what they felt was the hydrology and drainage areas at that time, and one of the maps I found actually shows a pipe connection from that area going up to Little Comfort, kind of back behind a farm there. It's probably an old drain tile pipe, and that kind of lines up with what we heard when we met with the city of Wyoming to discuss this, kind of related to the pipe along Heath Avenue. Is that right? So basically their understanding of that pipe was that was put in to essentially replace that old pipe connection that had become degraded and clogged. But I think out of that, I think in the spring we definitely would want to get out and see if we can find where that old pipe is and see if there's any water still coming out of it, and if so, sample that, along with also getting some monitoring samples at the Heath Avenue pipe outlet. So, but just kind of going through this process has really helped me get a better understanding of the hydrology in that area, and I'll try to bring something back probably at the March meeting, give you a little bit more detail on that.
Okay, you're talking about that pipe on the corner of Heath and 8 that was pouring water?
Correct.
Okay.
So is their understanding that outlet was essentially to replace that historic outlet, and basically that had, I think what the deal was, I think that whole area was just kind of internally drained and didn't really outlet. I think historically it probably just all drained internally to wetlands, and it either evaporated or infiltrated. Well, when they came in and cleared the land, tried to make it usable for cropping, they added that pipe outlet, is my theory, the old pipe outlet, and then in order to kind of maintain those flows, the city, along with that development, put in that other connection over there. So,
Well, that could have happened, but that actually happened when the township was still alive and that Liberty Ponds development started.
Yep, that's the development.
And it was grassed ditches. And that all went away when the construction started. And so the ditches got disturbed. And so there was just nothing but mud coming down. So that was the first outcry, warning sign. And then a bigger culvert was put into the ditch system. There's a kind of a catch basin up past, I think, the Second Farm's driveway.
Yep.
on Heath, and you'll see that. That's where that culvert comes under the road from the farm area.
Yep, and I have all the plans for that now. I got
that,
those
okay.
from the city, so.
Yeah, so my understanding then was that there was additional drainage coming down from that Liberty Ponds development that was being piped out into the ditches and then conveyed not through grass swales anymore, but through a pipe.
Yep, I do believe that. The water from the Liberty Ponds does eventually make it to that ditch system and then down that pipe, yep.
Okay, well, very good. Just so I'm clear though, the project that's going on with the interchange redo, if you will, from MnDOT goes now all the way down to Comfort Lake?
This is a separate project, so that they're not actually doing anything with the road itself. They're just going in and fixing the culverts and either replacing or lining those. I mean, I do anticipate eventually they'll come in with a road project out there, but that's
Yeah,
not part of the current plan.
I think so too. So we're going to be really tightly looking at that every step of the way, correct?
Correct.
All right. No surprises.
There's always some surprises.
Always surprising with that.
Yeah. This work, just one final question, the work with the University of St. Thomas students, oh yeah, it says that. So the district staff and engineers will be overseeing that to make sure that it's meeting protocol and all of that requirements, correct?
I think it'll be more so they'll be gathering some information, and then
Right.
as they find useful information, will get forwarded to
Okay.
Mike and myself.
All right. I mentioned to Mike that the Wank study in 2008, there's a reference in there that they dissected and diagrammed 70 culverts in the district, and I'm assuming that a lot of those are in that area. So have we looked at that Wank study just to make sure?
Yep, it's actually sitting open on my desk right now, the big map.
Fabulous. Did they do the culverts in that area?
Some of them. So the study basically focused on the major culverts in the district. They definitely didn't go through and do all of them. So, you know, I'd say probably only maybe 20% of the culverts that are actually as part of that Highway
Yeah.
8, but the larger ones are in that study.
Well, one of the district lores is that there's an HDR study of culverts that contain all of the Sunrise River area in Wyoming, and that was done when the WMO and Wyoming Township were trying to work together under that joint WMO structure. And I have seen that report, so I know it exists. I'm probably one of the only surviving members that of the area that have actually seen that. But it's somewhere in the district office. But I'm just wondering if you've stumbled across that one, because
I don't think I've
they did a
seen
walking tour of that entire stretch, and supposedly it's still around somewhere.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to see
Okay.
it if we can track it down.
All right. Thank you. That should be interesting. And as you mentioned, Mike, this is maybe the beginning of a diagnostic study, or a study that will be incorporated into the Comfort Lake District diagnostic study. So,
Well, presently, so you are, I've asked them to put together a summary of monitoring activities, all encompassing for the district for 2018. So we have what we're budgeted, but of course, since last summer, July, August, a lot of things have changed, and including some of these pieces of what can we get in here, you know, sampling wise, this historic tile, the other one, and maybe some other places within this drainage area. And of course, as I mentioned this afternoon, the Himes Lake drainage area. So how do we, so it's really the basis for putting together a scope for the diagnostic monitoring, but that would help feed that.
adaptive management. Opportunities arise, and we adapt. Okay, next item is the Lower St. Croix One Watershed, One Plan Memorandum of Agreement.
Madam President, managers, we have been discussing the One Watershed, One Plan topic for a while, and the Lower St. Croix was selected for a pilot program for completion of a One Watershed, One plan, and the district is a part of that. District had provided some input into the memorandum of agreement between the roughly 18 entities that would participate in this, establishing the desire to have a certain amount of or particular criteria from Bowser in there to focus our efforts. There the other entities elected that it should not be included in there, and so the draft for the current MOA that has been subsequently passed around to the other entities, and many of them have already approved it, is without that inclusion. As such, then, the board has the option of still proceeding with the approval of the MOA and at a future time withdrawing from it. Or, of course, it can simply elect at this point not to participate. In addition, just as a maybe somewhere in between, staff in partnership with council, you may recall that there was another mechanism to at least state back to the remaining entities that while they did not include that language in our own resolution to approve the MOA, incorporated within is this still suggestion that we would pass back to them our desire that we would want to have some more structure to prioritize our efforts that are supposed to meet this targeted, prioritized, and measurable outcomes per the Clean Water Fund statute.
Well, I will kick off the conversation. I had a real hard time with this resolution, and this came from the Planning Committee, right? And first of all, in the second paragraph, second to the last line, it said, it references watershed scale instead of watershed-based implementation framework, and that's repeated in the next whereas sentence. Second to the last one on page 1, the last part of that sentence, we're agreeing that it does not involve a funding commitment beyond the dedication of reasonable staff resources. I think we've talked about that, how much time it's already taking. And then on the last one, it's adding some wording in here that I think is just not comfortable for me, and that's the board strongly supports the fund allocation principles of Bowser has adopted for One Watershed, One Plan. If you read that guiding principles, I agree with that, but that's not how this structure is being presented. If you read that last whereas on that page, it really sounds much closer to what we're currently doing, but yet that's not how it's being positioned by this planning group. So my personal feeling, unless there's some compelling reason I don't know about to belong to this, I think it's just taking way too much time of staff. It doesn't appear, I don't know that you've shared yet, Mike, your comments from that last meeting you attended, but it just doesn't seem like they're willing to look at other alternatives. So it looks like their decision has been made, their construct has been already sealed, and they're not listening to any other input. The dollars, when you look at what is allocated to Washington County, $750,000, I think we've all talked about this before, is that we're all squabbling over what's going to be very small amount of funding that could possibly be coming to the district. There's just too many people in that small area, and the approach they seem to be using is one that's not consistent with watershed management. It's on area. Doesn't have any prioritization on water quality or improvement of degraded areas. It's just on a strict calculation on area. So I think that we have so much that we can accomplish with the time that would be spent on this, because now it's just Mike's time. Eventually, as this goes along, it's going to be board members' time being on a policy committee. And if it's not going to have the kind of outcome that we want, and we feel is correct, then it's really wasted energy. I'd rather have that focused on our district goals. Yes, Chuck?
Madam Chair, board members, and obviously recognizing all of your considerations there, not speaking to those, but just clarifying a couple of things about the framework. First of all, this resolution here is a resolution that I drafted for the board to consider.
Okay.
And it's a basic resolution. The partners are asking for each of the partners to take action to adopt the MOA or not. And so this is a basic resolution to adopt the MOA, but including the whereases that we had discussed before, where you would be saying, we're approving the MOA at this point, but we're interested in the ultimate way that funds are distributed, meeting these criteria that are important to us. And we're going to keep an eye on it, and basically if it doesn't go that way, we could very well drop out of this effort. The other thing to say is, to my understanding, the MOA at this point is about the structure, about how the group is going to function in developing the plan, and as you've referenced, Madam Chair, that there's a policy committee that's established that in the course of developing the plan will be the major place where discussion and decisions will be made about things like how the funds will be allocated. Maybe Mike can speak more to this. My sense is that the other partners did not favor including the district's language at this point because they felt that decisions about funding allocation are premature and should be discussed in the policy committee and come out of the policy committee. So I don't think they've rejected it. I think they're just saying it's not time yet. If that's
So this memorandum was your doing, not given to us by,
the resolution.
yeah, this
Yes,
resolution? Okay, that was not my understanding.
I take responsibility for that.
Okay, and then why
So
did you
that's-
use a watershed scale instead of watershed based? That has two different meanings to me, so I don't know, maybe,
That language I did pull from the MOA.
okay.
Because it's just a description of what the 1W1P cooperative effort is.
Well,
So,
but it.
as expressed by the,
Well, watershed scale means area. Watershed based means the criteria that watersheds use to determine projects, to me. So it has a really different meaning.
and it's your resolution, so I'm happy to make changes.
Okay? I honestly did not understand that. I thought this was a template that we were handed by the Lower St. Croix group.
And I apologize for not correcting that interpretation. When we were discussing it this afternoon, I thought, in fact, that we were looking at the draft MOA. Maybe get that pulled up.
Okay, so that can be changed to watershed-based instead of scale, that helps. And do not involve a funding commitment beyond the dedication of reasonable staff resources. Is that true?
Well, I think that was for basically for us, saying that we're being, or that we have expressed an interest or partnership interest in the development of the plan. And if we provide support for that, that we would be reimbursed for the time that we actually, staff time actually incorporated into that effort.
And do we know that to be true? They
Well, I think
reversed
that's
on-
the point of, I guess, of Chuck's, or the comment, or the resolution would be that, hey, we can say, we're gonna help up to a point that, I mean, if it drags on, or if they keep adding things, we could walk away from that responsibility of doing extra work.
That's right. The intent is to say here that the board is approving the MOA based on the expectation and understanding that this is the limit of the resource commitment at this time.
So why are we changing that watershed scale to watershed base? It seems like we're talking about a map here, so wouldn't that just mean watershed scale, doesn't that just mean across the whole watershed? That's the way I read it, when I read it.
Yeah, and to me, that watershed scale meant geography.
But we're talking about a map, so it would just mean across that whole map of the one watershed, one plan, suggested boundary map number 29. So when I read it, it means to me that you're just going across that boundary of the one watershed, one plan for that area. I don't know, that's the
But
way.
designating, to me, it means they're designating importance of areas. This area is more important than that area. That's what that says to me. And who's gonna do that?
Well-
Because all of our area is way important, more important than anybody else's to us. And so we have all these people in this committee that decided, across the whole area, people from all over the whole lower St. Croix deciding and putting their own input on what area is more important than the other area. I mean, that's what I see out of it. Maybe that's not what it means, but that's what a scale means to me.
Madam President, managers, as noted, it's, this was language in the MOA, and as I understand it, it has been expressed, is, in part, I think one of their focuses is developing a program, if you will, that's watershed scale. And if I'm understanding Manager Anderson correctly, our focus is more from a watershed base, meaning that the adaptive management focus that we have versus saying, let's spread something or the funds across the entire area. We might want to say that for the Moody Lake example, we're saying, let's focus our efforts here because we now have identified a particular item. So it's, because in the reality, if we were responsible for the entire Lower St. Croix, we would use the same process for identifying those projects that have the greatest return on investment, the greatest impact for the least amount of dollars. So I think that's the description and the understanding that I have from Manager Anderson, and as I understand it from the other staff that have described this, the element of watershed scale implementation. I think that is something different. That goes back to the somewhat of the Ag BMP discussion we had earlier about doing something on a broader scale versus something that's going to meet this TPM required targeted, prioritized, and measurable.
Yeah, I'm okay with changing it.
It's somewhat semantics at this point, but
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. I mean,
I think we'll get our point across with the resolution, irrespective.
Well, it goes more closely and fits more closely with that description in the last whereas on page 1, where it's talking about watershed-based diagnostic assessment to be used to identify. So Mike's differentiation between scale and based is what I was absolutely meaning. To me, that's a much tighter focus than scale. Scale is the whole watershed.
okay.
So if this is our resolution and we can change those words, we understand what it means, it's not committing us to move forward if at any time we decide to back out of it, correct? Okay, does this have to be done by the end of February? Do we have to have this
The
delivered?
request is for it to be completed by
Okay.
this time.
As long as it doesn't cost us anything more than what we're putting in at this juncture, and it's going to require Mike's time. Part of the concern I have, though, is that so far, these meetings have been very frustrating, and they seem to generate a lot of negative feelings afterwards. And so instead of moving forward positively on our goal plan, we're spending a great deal of time, a critical staff member is spending a great deal of time in a basically no-win situation. And so at some point, I think the district has to make an evaluation of when to stop. If we're not seeing improvement in the direction of one watershed, one plan, to an end that we feel is appropriate, then I think we have to redirect our staff's efforts into the positive outcomes that we've just talked about here. I'd rather spend our staff time accomplishing even more. We've got other things that we want to, other projects, not things, but there's other projects, not just capital projects, but other projects that are in our plan that could help us improve even more on this reporting.
I'm not against that.
So to me, that is a much better
I mean, to
focus
me,
of
it's
our
just
time and
another
energy.
layer of meetings.
If it had a
This is-
positive,
Yes.
Yeah.
if
I
it had a
agree.
positive outcome, it would be a different thing. Because we would bring other parts of Minnesota into this same type of planning and success with cleaning up the waters of the state. But it doesn't appear that that's what's happening. And Mike, if you could just spend a few minutes telling the board about the outcome of your last interaction with this group, I think it would be helpful.
Madam President, well, what I described was actually the Metro watershed-based funding discussion, which is the next.
But part of
agenda.
this.
Right. Well, it's related from the fact that it's one watershed, one partner, one plan. So the Metro-based, and so when we attended a couple of Bowser meetings intended to describe, the Bowser board approved money in December at their December meeting for funding the Metro watershed-based funding, because all the Metro watersheds or the area are covered by approved, they are considered approved one watershed, one plan plans already. So we meet that designation. So they allocated funding under a pilot program for the next biennium for money to be implemented across the Metro. But it fell short right away from the standpoint that their distribution is based on county structures rather than on watershed, even though the title is watershed-based funding. Mm-hmm. In addition, then right out the gate, many entities have suggested that, well, let's just make it simple. Let's use a formula and just spread the money out, rather than taking the opportunity to consider the objective of the one watershed planning effort. What's really central to the legacy funds and the Clean Water Fund program as a whole, and that is what really means targeted, prioritized, and measurable. The argument on their side is that, well, we each have plans, we each know what our priorities are, and we're going to go implement. My argument against that is that, okay, if we're now looking, for example, on the lower St. Croix, why wouldn't we aggregate all the information? If there are some projects in Chisago County or something, or maybe there's, a half a dozen ravines that are highly eroded going into different lakes or the river, why wouldn't we prioritize those on a watershed basis, if that's in fact what the purpose of this is, versus a mechanism to distribute it somewhat equitably. It really flies in the face of what watershed-based, planning and efforts really are. So,
Right.
so presently, at least at the Washington County one, which is the next item on the agenda, the group has, except for me, agreed that we were just going to use a formula. Or that's they're going to be the staff recommendation going forward here. So, but there is a meeting coming up in March 7th in which this will be discussed, and anybody can attend that meeting to listen to that, including the cities. So.
Okay, so that gives you a little flavor for the last meeting he just had. Back to the resolution. Memorandum of agreement.
Well, I don't know. I guess we can get out at any time, but it's one of them things where I don't want to, as a watershed district, I don't want to be penalized for not being part of it. But on the other hand, it just seems like,
Well, let's examine that for just a minute, the penalty for being part of it. This county-based allocation is for the metro counties, which is still using under this Bowser ditch law, 7-county metro. So Chisago County is not part of it. And so we've got a third of our district that's not part of this process. I don't know how the other counties are getting allocations, if it's on an even basis or how that works, but we've got a third of our district that's not even part of this. So that's number one. And the dollars that are allocated for Washington County is $700,000 with how many, 15 organizations?
Well, it's 787,000. There are 8 watersheds, and then the SWCD in the county, so it's really 10.
Okay.
And the proposed allocation is 78,000 to the county structured organizations countywide, and then the rest just distributed by formula, most likely by area for the remaining
78,000 to each of the county-based entities?
structures, SWCD and the county itself.
Okay.
So
So they each get 78,000 from that 780?
787. Mhm.
Okay. And so now the balance of the, how many would that be? Would it be probably 8?
600,000 or something
Well,
for the 8, right? Yeah.
8 other entities? Yeah. So,
Well, there are other districts that are in multiple metro counties. Rice Creek, of course, is an example. But the other option with this March 7th meeting and with the others is for the board and others to say, you know what, let's just have the county send the money back, and we could communicate that through our county commissioners, send it back to Bowser, and that then the money would be distributed on a competitive-based
well, there's no
structure.
competitive nature to the distribution of funds under this structure.
There could be, but the group is electing presently not to proceed with that.
Okay,
It was discussed, but it was not.
And
put
doesn't
forward.
that violate Clean Water Fund rules for distribution of funds?
Bowser staff was present. They have continued to indicate that they would have an expectation that everything would meet this criteria, that it just because it's in your plan doesn't mean we're going to fund it through this program. But I think that they would, I think most everybody would figure out some way to still use some allocation, whatever they're given, whether it's $20,000 or $50,000, they're going to come up with something.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it's probably as good a time as any, but I had done a little research on SWCDs just so I understood how they were structured, what their guiding principles were in law and so forth. And it's a report that, it's actually a slide presentation that Doug Thomas put together to instruct SWCD board members on the history and their responsibilities and so forth. And I shared that with Mike, and we had a conversation about it just to make sure if there was any understanding he had that's different, that was straightened out. But to me, it looks like if we stay in this thing, as long as Mike's time is minimized because we're not going to make an impact, I don't think, on any decision, mindset changes. But if there's 700,000, 600,000, and if they decide to do it by geography, then how does our district stack up? That's the other question. How would our district stack up in Washington County with the others?
We're about 6% land area,
How much?
6%,
That's it? Really?
right.
So who's the big winner?
South Washington, so, but I'll say though, I mean, initially, the administrator there, Matt Moore, he was advocating for a competitive process.
Okay.
But it was pretty clear from the rest of the group that they wanted something simple. And just the formula seemed like the easy way out, but,
The formula being the percentage of land that
well, it's possible that they would consider other, and they will describe at this meeting various things. I mean, it could be number of acres of lakes, surface area of lakes. It could be the number of streams. It could be the number of wetlands. It could be the number of water towers. I
I
mean,
thought it was private ownership, though, was the driver at the meeting that I went to. South Washington has an awful lot of city and state and commercial property. I
well,
suppose commercial
the
would
amount
probably-
allocated to the counties is based on private land ownership. The allocation from the county down doesn't have a
Oh, it
criteria
doesn't have
set to
that,
it.
okay, okay. So if it ends up being geography, we're kind of on the short end of the stick, right?
Virtually any stick you pick is going
Okay.
to be on the short
So
end.
it'd be like, if they went just strictly by the percent of the watershed, it'd be 36.
Well, here's my thought. If it's 600,000 roughly, we're 6%, that's roughly about $50,000 a year. No?
36,
36?
right?
Yeah.
6%.
Right.
I was just using 10%, okay, yeah, take
Right.
away, so 35, let's say, 35, 36,000. So that's enough to fund probably one of the BMP programs. So,
Right, it's still, absolutely, it's,
so if it's free money, which it is, it's grant dollars, we don't have to pay it back, right?
Right.
So if it comes in, so it can fund something in our budget, and we don't worry about it funding any big projects, because it's never going to happen, and that kind of a structure.
Unless they
And-
change the structure.
The Bowser, my understanding of the Bowser structure, which, again, I talked with Mike to confirm, is that, or excuse me, not Bowser, SWCDs, the soil and water conservation folks are to work with entities, and that's local governments, farmers, whatever. They have a responsibility to have an annual plan. So instead of us giving them money, we put together programs that we want the SWCD to be involved in. We give that to them, it becomes part of their plan. They have to then take their plan to the county, and the county has to either tax for that or find funds through other resources that they have available to them that come to the SWCD, and then they use that to implement the program. So we end up getting money through this process in a different way. Instead of us contracting directly with the SWCD, we spend a lot of money with them every year. We can maybe work this in a different, it's like being on a different highway, we're just driving on a different highway, but we're getting the money from the county and through the SWCD instead of them getting it from us. And that could work. So I don't think there's any harm. Now that I understand this, we can change that wording from scale to based and then pull out of this at any time that we feel. But maybe we just don't fight so hard to change the mindsets that aren't going to be changed, and we participate so that we can get that 36,000.
Take that money.
Or
Because it's
whatever.
not designated for any specific
Exactly.
project. It's just to fund our budget.
right, the Lower St. Croix, that money won't come into that until the plan is completed and,
Right.
and then the next round of funding. But for the other one, for the watershed-based one through Washington County, it seems to be on a path, and I appreciate what you're suggesting as a board, that I just minimize my involvement. I've said my piece about how I feel that the district here would like to pursue this from a watershed-based approach, but there wasn't much reception for that. So we can just let that proceed as it appears to be going, and then focus our time and effort on these other things.
Yeah, and once the funding process is decided upon, and we really know what it is, then we have to apply our cost-benefit analysis method and look at whether or not we are getting the benefit out of our participation. Because at that point, it's going to include a board member, and it's going on a policy committee, and it's going to include your time, continually include your time. And so we have to, at some point, make that evaluation, I think. Maybe it's not worth $36,000 because we're spending more than that in staff time, attending meetings, you know what I mean? Chuck, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Another feature of this, and I'm trying to think of how I want to offer this thought because this whole thing is so complicated, and there are several different policy questions that have to do with wholly different elements of this overall program. But one thing to note is that the matter now about this pot of money that's just being split up on an area basis is that it's an interim arrangement. The overall notion that's driving all of this is that all of the clean water funds to date for implementation of projects have been through competitive process that you folks seem to like, and the district has done well, and it's based on the considerations that you think it should be, the performance based and all of that. Bowser is moving broadly away from this type of statewide competitive process to a process where they're looking to establish these one watershed, one plan groups, give out the money to these groups, and then let each group determine how it's going to spend that money internally. One driving force is Bowser, for whatever reasons, doesn't want to have to administer this big statewide competitive process any longer. The issue about the money being distributed on an area-wide basis applies only to the 7-county metro area, because that area is an exception from one watershed, one plan, because as Mike noted, we have our separate watershed planning process. All the districts within the metro area have done their plans. They don't need this additional one watershed, one plan layer. So the question becomes, if Bowser is now taking all of this big pot of clean water fund money, giving it to one watershed, one plan groups outstate, what about the portion of the money that goes to the metro area watershed organizations? And that's what Bowser is wrestling with. And so for this 2-year pilot program, they've been given this pot of money, implementation money, and there's not a lot of time to figure out how they're going to distribute it. There's a lot of administrative burden, and what they've kind of done, to my perception, is they've just sort of looked for something expedient. They said, we're just going to parcel it out to each county, and then they can split it up based on land area. So the point of that is, it may be very unsatisfactory now, and all the other watershed folks that we work with are also dissatisfied like you are. Minnehaha Creek has already written to Bowser about it, and the others are kind of where you are, which is, we're not happy with it, but right now it's just for this 2-year pilot pot of money. And what's important to us is to be very careful that it doesn't necessarily become the policy that Bowser follows after the 2 years for the bigger Clean Water Fund whole implementation program going forward. So it's a long-winded way of simply saying that one thing you ought to think about is what role you want to play and how active you want to be in looking at the longer-term Bowser policy decisions that are made about how to distribute this metro money. And it seems to us that through Metro Mod or through whatever mechanism, there's probably a critical mass or a lot of folks who are ready to engage Bowser and try to push them back toward the watershed-based, the performance-based type of funding. So that's one point, and that goes beyond today. The other thing to mention is that we've said it. I mean, each time this watershed district is unique because it's the only watershed district that's half in the metro and half outside the metro. And so if you don't participate in the One Watershed, One Plan organization, it's unclear if there'll be a way for you to get some portion of the outstate Clean Water Fund implementation money that is going to be distributed through the One Watershed, One Plan process.
We'll ask for an exception. Well, and that question's been asked. I mean, they haven't even thought about that. So because we're an outlier, we can ask for an exception because of that outlier. We just don't know, how to function under this structure. So there are some outs for us, but the thing that's most troubling to me is that there doesn't seem to be a willingness at this stage to look at anything else. And so that's kind of what we've been talking about, is there seems to be a mindset already that this is the end product, and your input's nice, but we're gonna read it, we're gonna put it over here, and we're gonna go ahead and do what we want to do. And the people driving the train right now are the counties and the SWCDs. They're the county-based entities. And so rather than banging your head against a brick wall, why not just look at the path that this is taking and say, okay, how can we be on this path and still have it benefit us? And if we look at the funding, the way it's going to be coming down through the counties to the SWCDs primarily, while everybody else scraps over the, the leftovers, we can maybe turn this around and look at getting our money in a different way. And that's contracting with the SWCDs, but in reverse order from the way that we've been doing it.
Wasn't Chisago County part of this too?
They are part of the Lower St. Croix. In fact, they're a required participant. If the county board opted not to participate, the MOA effort for the Lower St. Croix would go away.
Shouldn't we be getting money from?
No, the plan isn't completed and won't be for another year and a half. So,
okay. Because we're for sure part of that, right?
Right, and that's where it's interesting, and it's another unknown because the watershed funding for Washington County includes areas that drain to the Mississippi and to the Lower St. Croix. So the Lower St. Croix portion of Washington County could, in theory, be eligible for that pot of money, the Lower St. Croix One Watershed, one plan pot of money, as well as a competitive base. So people have already taken note of that, and some are crying foul. But it's just like, well, what's the problem? I mean, if we're implementing and we're meeting the criteria, and especially on the competitive side.
Do we know how much money Chisago County is getting, or that's not being allocated by a county basis?
But presently, they're not getting any.
Yeah.
So they won't get it until the plan is completed, and we won't know until, at the earliest, 2 years. Depends on when the plan gets done. It might be 4 years.
So we have to plan then from two perspectives. One being part of the 7-county metro and one being an outstate county. And that's okay, because that favors what's been lagging in our focus here, and that's Comfort Lake. So the Comfort Lake district will get focused. Now here's the real twist, is that the majority of the drainage in the Comfort Lake district comes from Washington County and from an urban area in Washington County, and urban stormwater, not agricultural stormwater. So it makes it very complex.
I brought that up at our watershed-based meeting.
Well, there again, what I say is stop working in this pit that we're in that doesn't work to our advantage, and let's ask for an exception. And if we have to go to the legislature to do it, so be it. I know a lot of legislators, from working the Hill for our industry, the healthcare industry. I know a lot of them. So we can get support to do that,
What would the legislation be like?
to accept us from this nightmare that Bowser has created. That we get maybe we get our own pot of money because we're this unique entity. And we've got the results to prove it.
I think that would get us farther than anything.
I agree. So,
Well, I will make a resolution, I will move that we adopt resolution 180202 with the language changes that Jackie mentioned.
it's just, put it in your motion. It's just changing scale to base.
Changing watershed scale to watershed based.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? So roll call vote. Jackie Anderson, aye. Jackie McNamara?
Aye.
Wayne Moe?
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz, absent. There's no absent Colin here. I will add one. John Spence, absent. Majority of the board has passed the resolution, and I declare the resolution adopted, February 22nd, 2018. Okay, nothing more on the watershed-based metro funding pilot?
No.
Mike, okay. Moody Lake Project Bowser article. Can we wait before we get to that? This one watershed metro, there's a letter that was attached to the memorandum. Is this something you wanted us to?
No, just letting you know that memo will go out to the two cities, City of Forest Lake and the City of Scandia. It'll be a joint letter between the adjoining watershed districts. And, but again, it's an information regarding the invitation to attend that meeting on March 7th.
Okay. All right, moving on to the Moody Lake Project Bowser article.
And President Managers, at the last meeting, there was consideration for an article regarding our Moody Lake project that Bowser staff had initially drafted with some input from staff and interviews from the landowner, et cetera. Based upon some additional input, we have two versions for the board to consider. We could use one or both. Bowser has given us the media contacts that they normally use, and we could, again, send one or either or both articles out to those, in addition to using it for other media outlets that staff uses presently, our website or for other means.
Okay, just to give a little refresher here, the first article we got from Bowser did not look anything at all like this Bowser version that's in front of you. It was all about Bowser, nothing about the context of the district and our planning process and so on. And so there's a lot, they adopted almost everything that was recommended to them in this revision. And so that's good. The one thing that they didn't do, which I found really weird, there's quotes that Mike made about the project that weren't included. The history on, and it's just a brief couple of sentences really, but it gives the context for the deep core sample. When you read their article, it sounds like the St. Croix Watershed Research Station just came in and did that deep core sample. In the district's version, it gives the context that the district contracted for that to establish the baseline for the lakes and for meeting our aggressive goals. At the very end, there's some different wording in how the lead up to the quotes, from the Mr. Mattson and so forth, that gave a little background, and some of Mike's the background was fleshed out a little bit more in the quotes. But in their version, they left out the credit I gave to EOR for working with us and our mission here, and a little bit more history on, well, I see they did include that Moody Lake. I put Bowser at the end of the list of credits, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District at the top, EOR as our engineer, and then Bowser last. And so that's in the proper order, I believe.
Of course it is.
And so Bowser did something that, at first, when we started working with them, it wasn't the understanding that they were going to do, but I called John and talked to him briefly, and I was being told that they don't take input from districts, and so I called John, and he said, of course, we want your input. And they did not send out the release like they normally do, but they gave us their list. So once the board was comfortable with the presentation of the information in the article, then it's up to us to send it out. So that's good. We made some progress.
So we can send out either one of them, or? I guess I didn't really, I'm just kind of skimming through it, but I'm okay with releasing either one.
Okay?
I suggest we release Manager Anderson's
Okay.
convert.
We'll call it the board. The board authorized me to do those, so
Right.
it's really the
Yeah.
board's revisions.
Okay.
And so that's the one I favor because it gives more context. And it gives more credit to the district throughout the article, and then certainly to us at the end, and our staff engineer that we've had for
Right.
the majority of this period, and they deserve credit over Bowser.
I agree.
Yeah, well, and, yeah, I like this. I also like that, that email that you sent me, well, with this in there, and then that little film, or, you know, the little video that you did on the lake or whatever. It'd be nice if, is that posted on our website at all, or?
On the social media pages, it's not on the website itself.
Yeah, our social media,
Huh?
on our social media sites, so.
Yeah, I sent that out to my sister, she works with the state, and she was like, wow, this is really impressive, so it'd be nice if our lake associations and could see the same stuff you sent out to me,
Oh, I agree. I think that should be on our website as well. I agree.
so.
That was, I think you sent that
But I mean,
to all of us,
it's
so.
just nice footage too, because it's sunny and, you know, it shows the, it's just, it's a nice video.
Well, can't you do a separate page on a feature like that so that it looks like kind of a YouTube thing where, yeah, so the article's there for them to read and download if they want to. You've got all those great pictures from start to finish. There was one in,
Or,
there's one in the Wank report that you really need to grab and put on the website because it shows that cattle manure basin basically is what that wetland looked like from 2008. And you can see the slurry in the basin. It's not pretty.
I've actually got some pictures at home, I'll take some pictures with my phone and send them to Mike. I had taken some pictures when it was like in the middle of winter, when it was in feedlot
Oh, yeah?
operation.
Yeah.
And it's just, the whole hillside's filled with manure.
Right. That's
But-
great. That's really what should be on there.
Maybe bring them by and we'll scan them.
Yeah.
Huh?
Bring them in and we'll
Perfect.
scan them.
All right.
Okay, so there's
So, but
consensus to use
One other thing I
the,
was gonna say is if we send this out, could we put on there for more information or to watch the video about it? Could we put a link on?
sure. I thought that did say for more information. Maybe it doesn't. Yeah, but that's good. We should add that at the bottom of the release. Yeah, that's a good point. So the consensus of the board is to use the board revised version? Okay,
Yes.
all right, good. Thank you. Next is the administrator review process. And that is, Manager Schmaltz reminded me that it's that time of the year again. He has done it for the last 2 years, does not want to coordinate this year's, and so I'm asking, I've done it before, if Jackie McNamara or Wayne Moe, if you would like to have a turn at it.
Sure.
Okay. I'll work with you on that. Now, we've been talking about revising the actual form. We've used that now for 10 years, and Administrator Kenny has pulled several from other districts,
Okay.
so I'll have him send those to you.
Okay.
And I've got a couple. If you've
Okay.
got some from your past business experience that you like, this is for manager level. We can take a look at those, and then hopefully maybe on Monday,
Okay.
you and I can meet and go through those and see which one we like, and we'll choose that, or use that chosen one, I mean, and then that will be sent out. We'll ask Jessica to help us to get, if we're making changes, to get that typed up on the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake letterhead, or with the image. It doesn't have to be letterhead, but the 28th, we will send out and this is by mail, to
Okay.
each manager, the new form and the process, just kind of an overview sheet that we use.
Okay.
And it will include this timeline, that you will have a month to do your reviews and get the reviews turned in at the 3/22, March 22nd meeting. And then the results will be compiled by April 9th. I'll help you
Okay.
with that.
Okay.
And the review will take place, there's always, it'll be you and I then that will meet with Mike on the 16th at 4 PM
Okay.
at the office, and we'll do the review with him first, and then we'll do the full board review at the meeting it would be that Thursday, so, yeah, that's a Monday, 18th, 19th, 4/19, yep.
Okay.
Okay, so the full board review will be the 4/19. And we just got we had asked our consultant to give us an update on the salary survey. And so that's just come in today. So Mike, are you going to send that out by electronic means to the board and not wait until?
Sure, I can set it on anytime now.
I think that would be
it's
good.
It's the first draft. I'll see if she has that other piece.
Yeah,
finished.
otherwise we can include it in the packet. So that works too, because we're going to be mailing out the review documents, so we can put it in that
Sure, that'll be good.
envelope as well.
That's probably better than piecemeal.
Yeah,
You just package it all.
exactly. Okay, so with that, there doesn't have to be a motion on this, but just the consensus action of the board is to appoint Manager McNamara to lead the review process this year with assistance from President Anderson, following the schedule that was just outlined.
Okay.
Okay. Next item is the report of staff, administrator.
Madam President, managers, I think there's anything specific that's come up in the last few days that's not, hasn't been already mentioned. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
How are permits coming in? Any uptick or?
We've had 3 so far.
Yeah, so, yeah, no major developments at this point that I've seen. Couple single-family homes, and then a trail project for the city of Forest Lake that will be probably coming to the next board meeting.
Okay.
What trail project is that?
Safe route to schools.
The safe routes to schools. What's
Okay.
school is that? I can't remember.
The middle school over here, or the one off of west of our office.
One on the south of 61?
No, it's,
Southwest Junior High?
yeah,
Where?
Southwest Junior High? By
Oh,
Target?
southwest, okay.
That one?
Yep.
yeah,
Is that the one?
Target, yeah, between our office and Target.
The, do you want to mention that mod legislative reception?
Sure, I handed out the sheet. We got it yesterday, and I emailed it out as well. But it's the schedule for the various meetings for the legislative session that's coming up. March 7th, Wednesday, is the main date. I'll be attending the morning session, and then the afternoon session, we have another. It's that afternoon meeting on our watershed-based funding piece.
Okay, Mike, you and I have talked about some enforcement positions that need to be watched more carefully, so La Pointe Utilities is one, I know. The mini storage expansion, I had a question on that, top of page 2. Did this just, they just didn't take action on this project for a year, and so it's, the permit's past its period and it's just dissolving, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then under the existing permits inspections, that first one on Chestnut Creek Development, it said significant sediment tracking was observed. Where is Chestnut Creek again?
That's on the west side of the Forest Hills Golf Course.
Okay.
It's a large development.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's right. So that would go into Shields? Or where would that track to?
It drains in two different areas, mostly into Shields. Some of it goes north across Scandia Trail into the other golf course, actually. So, but most of it drains east into the Shields Lake project area.
Okay. But some of it could go into Forest as well?
Well, ultimately, it always does, but
But it's far enough away that that's not going to impact it, but this would
well,
go into
right,
Shields,
it's
okay.
probably as much, well, two things. It's probably impacting their own stormwater ponds that they have on site. So, but we've, during the permit process, we communicated with the city that, and they were receptive to this piece where we're going to do an as-built on the stormwater ponds when they complete the development. And so if the developer has been allowing contractors and others not to maintain the site and these stormwater ponds get filled up, they'll have to be cleaned out before it gets turned over to the city.
Okay. Okay, under 3003, monitoring and data, can we get this report any earlier from the Washington Conservation District? This is just such a pain to have monitoring that you're waiting on for projects that you're putting together in current time, and you don't have this report until April.
I think we can.
I've said this before, but I think that, this is one area I would like to see removed from the Watershed Conservation District, and used and completed by a team that could get the reports done on time and maybe give us a little bit more context for the data. We have to hire EOR to put this water collection, this water data that we do, the monitoring, into a understandable format. Megan did a nice job on that for us last year, so it's lacking in a lot of ways. So to wait for something that's not 100% what you want is even further insult. Under the 3004, the Ag BMP we talked about tonight, but I just wanted to keep reminding that we have the municipal BMP program that has not been implemented yet and will have to be when we complete the stormwater study, maybe even before, because this has such a huge impact for one of our community members, and that's Forest Lake, on any projects that they do within the city, and would encourage and make them understand why our rules are a little more stringent than Rice Creek's, because the water that flows off some of the streets, especially in that Lake One area, is going straight into the lake without any treatment. Under the report on top of page 3 to Bone Lake, I just wanted to ask how that went. We had a Bone Lake presentation by you, Mike. Can you just give us an update on how that went?
Yeah, it went well. The big thing that we talked about is kind of just the year-end, how the watercraft inspection program went on Bone Lake. They were interested in hearing some of the data from that and where other boats were coming from before they came into Bone Lake. And it sounds like the Bone Lake Association is interested in contributing additional funding to the program to have more inspection hours at their lake this year, just like
Wonderful.
Comfort Lake and Forest Lake have done in the past.
Any reaction to our budgeting?
Didn't hear any positive or negative comments about that.
Okay,
Talking about the Bone Lake Association meeting?
yeah.
Yeah, Wayne was there.
Yeah, I was there
Okay.
too.
Oh, good.
Thanks for coming to that. That was a pretty good turnout. It was like 16, 17 people there. So,
But they're happy with the projects that have been going on, and?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I
good.
think so, and seems to be pretty good participation. A lot of people were just kind of renewing their posts. Dave Bach or Baki is going to be the president again. But yeah, it was a pretty good meeting.
Good, wonderful. I had a question on, before the alum treatment, if we should be pulling more curly leaf. We already answered that earlier, so that's good. Mike, under 5,300 streams, you talk about the Army Corps contacting them for the stream restoration program.
Yes, so they have their own pot of money, so they were looking for, they have a program for active erosion sites that impact infrastructure. So while we don't necessarily have anything that meets that, I did talk to them since they were a partner to that Sunrise study completed in 2014, Sunrise River. And so I need to try to arrange the contact person was receptive or interested in meeting. I did forward the EUR report from 2011 or so on that north end of the Sunrise going into the Comfort Lake about how we could potentially partner on that segment of the river.
Okay, and I'll just add this, that I talked to Mike about the reference in the Wank study on the Moody Lake project being eligible for about $60,000 in wetland credits, and to see if that was really, he had to explain to me, I had to ask him to explain how that really functions, how it works, but if there's actually some dollars associated with that project that we can get back through that program, that's worth investigating. So he's going to do that and see if that's something. But the Wink study, which is the foundation of our current watershed management plan, indicated they had talked to Bowser, and there's a portion coming from Chisago, of course, and the larger portion coming from Washington. But the value total was about 62.5.
Nice.
So that would be nice if we could possibly get that qualified and some of those dollars available to us in whatever means necessary, or possible, I should say. Is that it, Mike?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Greg?
Yep, just a couple things. I guess the first thing is the Shields Lake fish barrier. If you recall, we had requested quotes on that last, well, towards the end of summer, fall, and only got a couple, and they were higher than the engineer's estimate, so we sent that back out for additional quotes, and we got several back, and the lowest one is below the engineer's estimate, so we'll be bringing a summary of that to the next board meeting, and hopefully get approval on moving forward with that later this year. For the Shields Lake reuse system, just want to let you know that that's continuing to move forward. We have a meeting scheduled on Monday with the golf course. Our design team's going to sit down with them and just kind of talk through a lot of kind of the details now that we're past the feasibility stage of, you know, when we can actually start, when we can close the road potentially for putting the pipe in, and then also a big component will be where we put kind of the material that we dig out of the pond. So previous discussions, we've talked about reusing that in portions of the driving range there. So we want to start getting into the specific details of how that'll look. So I think those are the two main things.
Okay. I just wanted to add to Shields Lake, I may have brought it up in the past, but it bears repeating. This is an example of our adaptive management strategy in work, because this was not, there was some work scheduled for Shields Lake, but it was in no way at this level. And what happened, of course, is when that farm sold and was going to be developed, it opened up an opportunity to do a project that would provide more value and clean up Shields, but also reduce the phosphorus load to forests. So this is a very, very good example also of the adaptive management philosophy in action, as well as JD6. I mean, that wasn't even on the radar when we put our plan together. So it's just, I think, important to always keep in mind how that philosophy has, and that guiding principle has come into play at numerous times and helped us move forward at a faster pace to accomplish the goals. So thank you, EOR. Smith Partners?
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Report of Treasurer.
I think I've got it. Looks like we had $47,462.63 of income this year, this last month in January. Our expenses were $91,962.77. And our balance to date in the checking account is $39,018.16 as of the end of the month anyway. And so I guess I look for a motion to approve the bills, or I don't.
Did you make the motion, or?
Well, I was making a motion, wasn't I?
I'll
Okay.
make a motion to pay the bills then.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. The bills will be paid. Thank you.
Yay.
Officer reports and managers. Wayne, we'll start with you.
Nothing.
Jackie McEnroe?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. I don't either. I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Darn.